Hi, I'm Julie Smith-David at the W.P. Carey School of Business at Arizona State University, and this is a short video to provide an overview to a portion of the article, Agility, the Key to Survival of the Fittest in the Software Market. This article was written by Brian Sommer, Bill McCarthy, and myself, and our main objective of the article was to provide a structure that would allow executives to understand the different categories of software that are available in the market and how those software categories can be matched with organizations. What we found was that executives were really struggling with the breadth of software that was available and not really understanding how they related to each other. And so we needed a structure, a way for them to think about what was actually happening. And we decided that evolution was a good analogy that could really provide them an understanding of the market by building on something they already knew. So if you think back to high school biology, the idea of evolution is that there will be survival of the fittest, that animals, organisms that have unique characteristics that allow them to compete more successfully will be able to produce more offspring, and those offspring will survive. And so if you think about it, the idea behind evolution is that a giraffe is very successful because it had a long neck, which allowed it to reach leaves that there were no other competition for. So whereas the animals that were much shorter were all fighting over the low leaves on the trees, giraffes are able to eat leaves with very little competition, and so they're strong, healthy, they're able to have offspring, and the animal survives. Well, if you continue with your biology discussion, remember that animals were divided into invertebra and vertebra. Invertebra don't have a backbone, and an example of an invertebra is an insect such as an ant. Well, the vertebrates do have backbones, and there are many different categories of those animals. So fish, reptiles, and mammals are on the evolutionary tree. And then within fish, we can think about bass or sharks. This is one area where evolution isn't quite linear because the sharks are actually older than the fish, but for our analogy, they're much stronger. Amphibians, reptiles would include the turtles, and then into the mammals, we've got the leopards, the gorillas, and the humans. One of the things that Brian Sommer added to the project was that communities are also really important. And so you can't just think of the animals in and of themselves, but how they integrate with other animals, both upstream and downstream. And so we'll show how that fits in. So we really used that as the structure, but we see that in the enterprise system space, we have the same outcome. There are systems that don't have sophisticated organizing rationale. They don't have the backbone. Those systems are really based upon single entry concepts and measure the transactions and obligations. When we think about systems that have organizing rationale, we really see two different approaches. One is the basic accounting equation of assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity, and the other is that we focus on the enterprise value chain with all of the processes that are inherent to an organization to provide the value to all of their customers. And we see that there are a range of systems across this continuum, starting with very small business systems that are able to support owner-entrepreneurial organizations up to very, very significant enterprise systems that are single source or best of breed integrated together. When we look outside of an organization, then we see that there are systems that have already been developed that help with upstream, the supply chain, or downstream, the customer focused. So this video is going to provide a high-level overview of each of those categories of software. To do that, I'm going to visually represent the differences by looking at the value chain for the Merchant of Venice. Imagine that you were in the 1200s, you went and got financing from a group of outside investors, bought a ship, with some of that cash, used some of it for hiring deckhands and payroll. You sailed to China and acquired some inventory, brought that back and sold the inventory, the silk or the spices, for funds, and those funds went back to the investors. That would be the value chain for the Merchant of Venice. Each of those processes is a simple exchange of resources, a give and a get, in all cases with one side of it being cash, the other side of it being some other type of asset. But you could see that there would be other resources perhaps that would be available. And I should have said resources, not assets. When we look at the systems then, when we begin with the very smallest systems, just like ants, they're really great at doing one thing. They're able to accumulate the economic transactions in a single entry fashion. So if you think about your checkbook, you're adding in deposits, which increase your check balance, and then you're writing checks, which decrease it. The way the systems are structured are really very simple with sequential order and search. Because of the way the systems are built now, there's additional fields that allow you to put some specification about those transactions, and you can actually do some high-level summary of what did you spend for inventory or rent, for example. But these systems are really well known for supporting cash transactions. That's really what they have as their foundation. So you see in the figure here that the get cash events are all highlighted because these systems can do a good job. When you move beyond that, however, you need a more sophisticated organizing rationale, and so the assets equals liability plus owner's equity systems are small business systems that really have at their heart the accounting principles and financial statements as the way of managing success. For small businesses, there's things like Peachtree and QuickBooks, and those we use the analogy of the fish. Very successful. They have some really nice flashy features, and they're great for small environments. When we move up to the multidimensional accounting systems, then we get much more into the shark world where they're strong and they can really provide broad support. And in these systems, they might be able to support management by having chart of accounts with up to 600,000 account codes. So a lot of the management is being done really from the general ledger. So in this figure, you see that the general ledger has become the heart of the system. Each of the other feeder systems is supported, but really the management is happening out of the accounting world itself. When we move beyond that, then we get to the enterprise system space, and the mid-tier systems are hybrids. They have both the accounting functionality as a way of driving organization and management, and also the enterprise systems. So the account classification doesn't matter as much, and we get into the point where we have really strong systems for the other areas within the organization. And specifically, this is the first type of system that has sophisticated manufacturing support. So here you see, we're not saying that accounting doesn't matter, but accounting has become relatively less important, and the focus on all of the individual processes that lead to success for the organization are equally important. And in fact, we're going to add in another process that wasn't in the simple merchant of Venice. By now, we're actually manufacturing. We're using up both labor and assets in order to create new resources that we'll be able to sell. And so from the merchant standpoint, if the merchant had expanded and grown into the dressmaking business, that would also be supported by these mid-tier ERP systems. When we get into the top-tier enterprise resource planning systems, these systems really have strong support for the various functions within the organization, and in fact, they can support a wide range of organizations. So rather than being designed for one industry or one country, these systems incorporate the capabilities for a broad range. Now, the market has undergone a lot of consolidation in the last 5 years. So J.D. Edwards was bought out by PeopleSoft, PeopleSoft was bought out by Oracle, and Oracle now offers these 3 different platforms, but they're also working on their Fusion platform, which is potentially a single source offering of the best-of-breed pieces for all of the others. SAP, of course, is the large player in this space. And what you get from an ERP system is that all of the processes are integrated. So rather than having the separate diagram that I had before, this demonstrates that within all the different processes can build off of the data. And if you go to the ERP video that we have, you can understand this figure in much more detail. Those systems are all great at managing your inside operations, but the world has gotten more complex. We've squeezed the efficiencies out of the organization, and now we've moved into interorganizational systems where there's digital communication between your organization and either your customers or your suppliers. And so there's a growing need for a common language and semantics that will enable that communication. But in the meantime, what we're finding is that systems have become well adapted for helping deal upstream. In this slide, it's showing advanced planning and scheduling really helps with understanding what capabilities your suppliers have and optimizing your sourcing decisions so that your manufacturing planning can be revised dynamically in real time and transactions executed with your upstream suppliers. In fact, that execution, there's a range of platforms that are built, e-procurement systems that allow you to provide to have digital support for auctions, simple transaction processing, bulk transaction, bulk acquisitions, and those would all be upstream. When you think about dealing with your customers are downstream, and we see that there's both customer relationship management systems, which are able to capture really the richness of your physical interactions with your customers, and there's electronic CRM systems, which allow you to provide really personalized experience through websites by being able to do dynamic personalization, content development, and content management. So if you add up to that, there's always emerging technologies that are on the horizon, and part of what we're going to be talking about are emerging tools in the collaboration space. So social media has had a big impact on people's personal life. We're now seeing the best of those capabilities being blended in and moved into the organization, either to enhance its internal operations by providing better communication and collaboration capabilities between employees, but they can also move into the how do you deal with your customers and your suppliers. In all of these cases, the really important thing is that no one system is right for all organizations or all environments. So just as we saw with evolution, we need to be understanding what the organizational characteristics are and then have the ability to analyze that organization to identify opportunities for enhancement by matching it with the appropriate system. So it's really not better to be an ant or a gorilla. Ants do amazing things in ant-like environments. And gorillas may not survive as well. And so I leave you with that to think that we're going to put all of these different pieces together. We're going to be able to understand the different systems, how they're being adopted in organizations, and how all those processes can be supported, either by a single source system or by the end. So now you should understand the key characteristics of off-the-shelf software, and that it's really important to understand how that will match with your environment. Thanks, and continue on with the videos.